The banners of winter rustled under a thin dawn, their gray direwolves half lost in mist that still clung to the trampled meadow north of the Trident. Campfires guttered low, and the smell of spent horse sweat, burnt oats, and wet wool drifted through a forest of tilted pikes. Robb Stark, scarcely 1 in 20 but already a veteran of a dozen victories, stood bareheaded beside Grey Wind's makeshift pen. His direwolf paced restlessly, silver eyes reflecting the pale glow of a sky yet undecided between storm and sunrise. All night Robb had weighed the summons that lay unfurled on the oak table in his tent. Stannis Baratheon's abrupt demand for homage, sealed in the fiery heart of a crowned stag. The ink was scarcely dry when it reached him. Stannis had taken Storm's End at last, rallying the lords of the Narrow Sea and half the Stormlands to his claim. More startling still, the Onion Knight had slipped northward with 2 battered war galleys, landed at White Harbor, and borne terms of alliance to Robb's uncle, Ser Desmond Greysteel. In Stannis' spidery hand were promises of justice, an end to Lannister tyranny, and recognition of northern rights none had thought possible from a Baratheon. Yet the parchment required 2 things in return: the bending of Robb's proud young knee, and the march of northern steel beneath Stannis' banner before winter swallowed the King's Road. Robb's bannermen muttered. The Great John roared that the North had a king already. Roose Bolton's quiet voice suggested that a crowned wolf could hunt alongside a crowned stag, needing no submission at all. Lady Meage Mormont bared her teeth at the very notion of taking orders from the south. Yet Catelyn Stark, robed in widow's gray, had watched her son pace the tent and remembered what war truly cost. 2 sons vanished beyond the wall, a daughter trapped in enemy hands, a husband's head rotting on a spike. Stannis is relentless, she told Robb when the others finally drifted to uneasy sleep. He will not bend, but he keeps his word, and he will see the Lannisters broken. Robb had stared into the brazier, listening to the iron crackle. Father said a true king protects the realm, not merely his own crown. He thought of the small folk who had cheered him at every mile, then watched their granaries burn in retaliatory raids. If Stannis is the realm's best hope, perhaps I serve the North best by serving him. So it was that, as dawn tinged the banners with ghost gold, Lord Robb Stark summoned his captains. He would ride to Riverrun first, to kneel upon Catelyn's ancestral stone and before the assembled Riverlords. The Great John argued until his breath steamed, but when Robb spoke of sworn swords dying in snows yet to fall unless justice came swiftly, even Umber's thunder quelled to a rumble. One by one, the High Lords knelt. Grey Wind threw back his head and howled. Far across the camp, for other direwolves answered. Nymeria, found at last by Arya's ragged host of river folk. Summer, padding beside a carriage that bore a silent, haunted Bran. Shaggy Dog, black as moonless water and twice as wild. And Lady, the white pup Sansa had thought slain, resurrected in rumor and now trotting at Ser Dantos's curling toe, each voice twining into one mournful, resolute chord that rolled across the fields like distant thunder. That same night, the North and Riverlands broke camp in disciplined columns. Robb's outriders slipped ahead, scouts ranged wide, and raven after raven winged for Dragonstone carrying oaths of fealty scratched in the blood-red ink of weirwood sap. Stannis read them by candlelight in the stone drum's highest chamber, the autumn sea roaring below, his jaw set like hammered iron. At last, he rasped to Davos Seaworth, honor rides south with me. The first snow of the season dusted the shoulders of the King's Road by the time Robb reached Maidenpool. Half the town's gates were blackened from brushfires, and gossip flew thicker than ash. Lannister outriders had been sighted in the fields, but none dared challenge the direwolves. Small folk gathered at Dunwalls to stare wide-eyed at Grey Wind leading the pack. 5 great shadows pacing before banners stitched with the crowned stag and direwolf entwined. Children whispered that the old gods had answered prayers. Winter wolves come to devour lions. Within the Maidenpool Sept, Robb met Ser Brynden Tully in hushed council. The Blackfish shook his grizzled head at whispered tales of wildfire stockpiled beneath King's Landing. Only half the rumors have teeth, Brynden said, but one spark could roast the world. Stannis sails from Dragonstone. If we strike before the Lannisters muster fresh levies, we take the city whole. Robb frowned at the map. And if we do not? Then Tywin buys the Reach anew, and our direwolf begins this war again with fewer teeth. So Robb sent word downriver, bidding Lord Edmure break dams and flood the Trident's fords to slow any western countermarch. Farther south, Mance Rayder, still unknown to most as the spearman called Bale the Bard, watched the banners flow past Harrenhal's cracked gate. In Stannis' campfires he saw omens, and in Robb Stark's steady gaze he glimpsed a king who might one day face worse than Lannisters. He spurred his horse toward Crackclaw Point, ghosts gathering in his wake. King's Landing simmered like a cauldron of spoiled wine. Joffrey preened upon the Iron Throne, but his court buzzed with dread. Renly's ghost still haunted the Whispers, and Stannis' fleet blocked Blackwater Bay in crescent formation. Now the young wolf marched on their backs, and stories of sorcerous direwolves prowled every tavern. Tywin's reply was curt. He ordered Joff to hold fast while he broke the Reach to heal, but ravens flew slow in winter winds. Cersei draped herself in crimson silk and feigned calm. Yet each night she stalked the Tower of the Hand, fingernails drawing blood where they dug into her palms. Grand Maester Pycelle muttered of wildfire caches. Ser Island polished his pale blade, and little Tommen clutched Ser Pounce beneath his quilted blankets, trembling at howls born of his own nightmares. Tyrion alone dared stride the ramparts, hair whipped by sleet. He studied the great chain being forged on the Mudgate Quay and thought of rivers of pitch and green death. But then came a raven with the Stark sigil broken by a bar of black, Robb's personal hand, and Tyrion's sardonic smile faded. "Direwolves south," he told Varys. "Never good tidings for lions." On the third night of the new moon, fleet lanterns winked beyond the bay mouth. Davos's longships slipped upriver, beached beneath the shadow of the city walls. At dawn trumpets blared beyond the King's Gate. Robb Stark rode at the fore, Stannis a hard pace behind, Baratheon crown of antlered iron catching the sullen light. Beside Robb loped Grey Wind, eyes reflecting torch flames like twin moons. Stannis' voice cracked through the frosty air. "I claim this city in the name of the gods and the realm. Open your gates and be spared a siege. Defy, and you will answer to king and wolf alike." Joffrey's answer came from the battlements, an arrow flung half-heartedly by a trembling squire. It clattered at Robb's feet, and Grey Wind snarled. A tide of dread swept the walls as 5 direwolves stepped forward, hackles rising. Even hardened gold cloaks took an involuntary step back at the sight, fingers slick on spear hafts. Within, Queen Cersei summoned Tyrion and Ser Lancel. "We will drown them in wildfire," she hissed, knuckles white on her goblet. "Torch the Blackwater, torch the wolves, torch Stannis. Let the gods sort bones from ash." Tyrion swallowed hard. He had seen what wildfire did to flesh at the Battle of the Blackwater that never was, a single test pot melting stone and men alike. "If the wind turns, we burn ourselves first," he warned. But Cersei's green eyes gleamed madness. As siege lines tightened and mangonels flung the first test stones, Sansa Stark sat in Maegor's holdfast, listening to distant drums. Through tear-blurred bars, she glimpsed the flutter of a direwolf banner and her breath caught. Lady, dead. But the howl she'd heard last night had sounded terribly familiar. Hope, sharp as broken glass, cut through the fog of fear. Robb's camp stretched in ordered ranks along the King's Road, fires banked low to keep smoke from betraying positions. Within his command tent, the air stank of boiled leather and tallow candles. Stannis brooded over a table strewn with parchments, Melisandre's red silk whispering as she moved like a living shadow. The priestess's eyes glowed ember-bright, reflecting visions only she beheld. "The flames show victory," she murmured, voice like warm wind across tombstones. "But only if the wolf kneels in truth." Her gaze locked on Robb. "Kneel before the Lord's chosen, and the night will break." Robb felt every eye upon him. His mother's silent plea, Davos's cautious respect, the Greyjoy's surly pride. Slowly he drew his sword. Ice was lost, but on his hip hung vigilance, a Valyrian blade gifted by Lord Celtigar in gratitude for lifting the siege of Claw Isle. He planted the naked steel before Stannis' boots, then bent one knee. "I, Robb Stark, Lord of Winterfell, do render fealty to Stannis of House Baratheon, first of his name and rightful king of the Undulls and the First Men." His voice rang clear, carrying beyond the tent flaps. "The North's swords are yours to wield, its wolves yours to unleash, so long as you guard our land and honor our dead." Stannis' jaw tightened until it seemed he might crack an iron tooth. Yet he reached, resting a scarred hand on Robb's shoulder. "Rise then, Lord Paramount of the North." With formal slowness he returned the sword. "Serve me, and the realm will remember honor." Outside, campfires flared as if stirred by sudden wind. Melisandre smiled. Somewhere, in smoky night, gray wind sang a triumph that sent ravens rousing from distant trees. Winterfell lay half-ruined and half-reborn. Under the watchful eyes of Ser Wyman Manderly's masons, new timbers rose where ironmen torches had blackened walls. Maester Luwin's ravens carried news daily. Bran's body mended though his legs remained lifeless. Rickon grew feral as Shaggy Dog, and Reek, once Theon Greyjoy, knelt in chains below the rookery, awaiting Robb's return. But the young wolf marched ever south, not north. The dire wash of the Trident ran red once more near Saltpans, where Lord Karstark's outriders collided with Ser Amory Lorch's rearguard. Dire wolves tore through mailed men, and rumors of that carnage preceded the columns like frostbite. Village after village opened gates without a fight. Small folk slipped out to press cider, cheese, even secreted coins into northern palms, praying to whatever gods would listen that the war end before the bitterest snows. On the Blackwater's northern bank, siege towers rose. Giant crossbows, Stannis' scorpions, rolled into place, crews swarming like ants over oaken arms thick as a man's chest. The dire wolves were everywhere. One perched atop an abandoned watchtower, another pacing the moat's dark lip, their howls timing with the creak of winch and groan of rope. The Lannister garrison fired flaming arrows futilely into night, each shaft answering with a ghostly growl. Inside King's Landing, the final harvest spoiled in warehouses commandeered by Lord Baelish before his mysterious flight to the Eyrie. Bread riots flared in Flea Bottom. Gold cloaks cracked skulls until streets ran foul. Queen Cersei raved behind heavy doors, while Joffrey screamed at any council but his own. Only Tyrion still moved with purpose, coaxing sanity where he could, bribing dock hands to scuttle empty ships so Stannis could not seize them, and nightly walking the walls to mark weak stones for dawn repair. Then dawn came white and bitter, breath freezing mid-sentence. Trumpets blared 3 long calls. From the north, siege towers crawled across the frozen mud, wolves padding before them. From the east, frost-rimmed sails of Stannis' fleet unfurled like dragon wings. And from the south, unexpected, thunder of hooves, serried lines of Highgarden green and gold. The Reach had ridden at last, but not for Tywin. Lady Olenna Tyrell had outmaneuvered the Lion, sending Mace to parley in secret with Stannis and Robb through the ruins of Bitterbridge. Stannis grudgingly offered seats on his council, marriages, gold. Olenna wanted security and vengeance in equal measure. When word reached her that Tywin meant to sack Highgarden for wavering, the Queen of Thorns sewed roses to Stannis' banners overnight. Across the field, Ser Loras led the vanguard. His white armor shimmering with frost, Tyrell rose over Hart. His eyes sought the gate where, he knew, Cersei watched. Loras remembered Renly's jade armor shattered by a shadow. He whispered a prayer to a dead king, then spurred his courser to a gallop that shook the frozen ground. The battle that followed would be spoken of in generations, the wolf and stag at the gate. At first light, Stannis' scorpions sent iron bolts shrieking over the walls, smashing Merlins and men alike. Robb's siege towers crawled forward, each creaking step carrying north and river banners higher until their walls of rawhide bulged against hoarded arrows. Gray wind leapt a half-collapsed parapet and dragged a kettle helm screaming from the ramparts. Summer joined him, tawny blur amid falling snow, while Nymeria led a pack of half-feral river hounds through the King's Gate breach cut by Karstark axes. Men swore the dire wolves moved like shadows, impossible to strike, their jaws breaking shields as if straw. Robb himself broke the gate of the gods. With one heave the ram, shaped as a roaring direwolf, splintered red oak. He led the charge into the slush-strewn streets, blade carving arcs of frosted crimson. Behind him the great John sang a northern march song, each verse ending in a roar. Lady Meage Mormont fought with her daughters like bears maddened by winter hunger. Ser Brynden Tully guided pikemen to hold alleys while Davos's sworn swords pressed toward the mud gate to open the riverfront. Amid the chaos, Tyrion Lannister donned mismatched armor and limped for the Red Keep's inner yard. He found Sansa by the sept door, eyes wet but unbroken. "Come," he said, gripping her trembling hand. "Wolves and lions both are beasts, but better your wolves." Together they fled through a postern, Ser Podrick hacking wildly to clear a path. High above, the great September of Baelor glowed sickly green. Hidden wildfire stores, ignorant alchemists fleeing, had ignited beneath the floor. The explosion tore marble saints from pedestals, hurled statues through stained glass, and sent a column of emerald flame ripping into the sky. The shockwave flung soldiers from walls like rag dolls. A thrumming silence followed, broken only by crackle of green fire and distant wolf howls. Cersei watched from Maegor's holdfast balcony, hair whipping her face. Tears cut streaks through soot. Beside her, Prince Tommen sobbed, and Ser Eiland drew his sword, uncertain whom to strike. When the first direwolf banner rose over the Gate of the Gods, Cersei reached for Wildfire herself. But in that moment Jaime Lannister burst into the chamber, golden hair singed, sword dripping. "Enough," the Kingslayer growled, knocking the flask from her hand. "You'll burn half the realm." He tore the iron crown from Joffrey's head where the boy sulked by a window, replaced it with manacles, and threw open the doors to Stannis' soldiers now flooding the hall. "I'll face justice, but the city lives." By dusk, the banners of Direwolf and Crowned Stag flapped side by side on the Red Keep. Tywin's host, still days away, received ravens commanding surrender. Many lords balked, unsure which master's heel would be lighter. But when reports came of Queen Cersei imprisoned, Joffrey stripped of rank, and Wildfire disarmed under Stark guard, most found reason to bend knee. Robb Stark entered the throne room last, boots echoing on broken marble. Stannis sat the Iron Throne, face stone, while Melisandre's red gaze burned from shadows. Robb knelt once more briefly, but without shame. In return Stannis rose, drew Lightbringer, and touched the glowing blade to Robb's shoulders. "Rise, Lord of Winter and Warden of the North. Let the realm see our bond." A thunder of mailed fists on shields shook the hall. The direwolves howled outside. 5 voices, 1 song. Hours later Robb found Sansa in the Godswood garden, snowflakes melting on her hair. She stared at the heart tree's bleeding face. "I felt Lady die," she whispered. "But today, it was as if she lived again." Tears glistened on her lashes. Robb drew her into his arms. "Winterfell awaits us," he promised. "Dire wolves always come home." Yet far to the north at Craster's Keep, rumors stirred of dead men walking. Beyond the wall blue shadows marched, indifferent to crowns and wars. In Dragonstone's painted table room, Melisandre's flames showed darkness deeper than any winter. She smiled, knowing kings and wolves alike would soon need more than swords to hold the night at bay. But for one brief turning of the year, the realm breathed wolf beside stag, rose beside direwolf, the Iron Throne glinting with the promise of justice hard-won. Snow whispered over charred rooftops, burying old blood, and somewhere in the alleys a child chased a pale wolf pup through falling flakes, laughing at last without fear. A hush as delicate as frost lingered in the throne room long after the clangor of conquest faded, settling over broken pillars like a shroud. Servants crept about gathering shattered marble and splintered lances, but every footstep seemed sacrilegiously loud beneath stained glass windows whose bright saints now wore spiderweb cracks. Robb Stark never cared for the throne itself. Its silhouette of razor hooks meant little beside the weight of fresh graves outside. But watching Stannis brood upon it that first evening burned the lesson into his bones. Conquerors and crowns shared the same iron smell. He left the Red Keep well before moonrise, choosing the steadier dark of the encampment ringing the city. In the torchlit aisles between tent rows, northern sentries stamped to keep blood flowing, breath frosting like ghost steam. Robb paused whenever a direwolf shadow glided across the canvas under lanterns. A reminder that the old gods still roamed with him even here, where sept bells rather than heart trees chimed the hours. Gray wind materialized from gloom without warning, muzzle still crusted from the day's fray, and pressed a heavy head beneath Robb's hand. Though blood thrilled through the wolf's veins with wild victory, the moment his master knelt and spoke in low northern, gray wind stilled, as if hearing some deeper song. Robb kept walking, heels stirring dust that would tomorrow be mud once rain washed away the ash. Past the Tyrell quarter, rose-scented despite cold. Past Stannis' stone drum banner snapping like flayed cloth. Past Manderley tents where minstrels already practiced songs of the sapphire direwolf and the burned stag. At the far edge, just shy of the city walls, stood a low pavilion of Riverrun red and blue. Inside, fires burned low and Lady Catelyn's shoulders hunched beneath a wool cloak twice patched since Riverrun fell into siege months back. Bran slept nearby, legs wrapped in thick furs, Summer dozing with chin on paws. Mother and son spoke little. Their silence was the brittle calm after a squall when even birds delay their songs. Robb knelt beside Bran and lifted the boy's hand. Bran's fingers, thin as twigs, curled around his brother's thumb. His eyelids fluttered but did not open. The maester from Dragonstone says he can coax feeling ba. CK, Catelyn whispered. Her eyes shone ceaselessly these days, not always from tears. Sometimes pure exhaustion made them shimmer like blown glass. I dared hope today might mark the end. Robb. Yet every ending births another war. We ride north soon, he told her. The Lannisters have snarled once and lost their fangs. What remains is politics and parchment, something Stannis can master inside masonry. Our place is the wall. A shiver tremored through her. Even dire wolves look small beyond that gate. So we bring giants and the South's coin. Stannis owes the North more than titles. He owes it safety. Robb's jaw tightened. I mean to collect. Come morning, the Conqueror's Council convened in Maegor's Holdfast. Heavy oak doors were barred against courtiers. Only principal lords and captains stood beneath soot-blurred tapestries, their breath clouding in the drafty hall. On an oval table lay 3 maps. The crownlands seamed with battle lines. The north traced with harsh mountain ink, and the wall, stretching across the top edge like an executioner's scar. Stannis opened with numbers. How many bushels of barley remained unspoiled? How many smiths could remake ravaged armor? How many ships anchored at Dragonstone still seaworthy enough to ferry grain upriver before ice sealed Blackwater Bay? Davos read the figures, voice gruff but calm. His sentences weighed the fortunes of thousands, yet none present doubted each coin would be accounted for down to the iron groat. When the floor turned to Robb, he spoke not of grain but ghosts. Beyond the wall, he began, and several Reach lords stifled skeptical coughs. Things stir the maesters have no names for. Rangers report dead men walking, ice spiders in moonlight, horn blasts that never echo back. Even my brother Bran dreams of crows with eyes like chips of blue frost. These are no tavern tales. If we do nothing, the wall becomes Southron business before spring thaws. Stannis' jaw flexed. The Night's Watch was founded for this very purpose. Yet you agree with Melisandre that the watch is broken. His eyes bored into Robb, bright with a zeal that frightened even those who worshipped with him. The Lord of Light sends visions of cold shadows. If your direwolves howl, mine will burn. I intend to ride north as well. Gasps rose. The Iron Throne had not seen its new king crowned more than a day. Abandoning it so soon felt to many like leaving a babe in a bear's den. But Stannis raised a gauntlet hand. My loyal wife and Queen Celis will preside in Dragonstone. Ser Courtenay Penrose leads the city watch. And Lord Tyrell, his gaze flicked to Olenna's son, shall keep the capital fed. We ride because the realm cannot afford legends turning real. Marching dire wolves and kings north is folly, the great John rumbled. Let the watch mend its own cracks. My men have bled enough. Roose Bolton's hooded eyes glittered behind lampshadow. Yet my Lord Umber knows winter carnival stories are seldom told twice. If they persist, perhaps there is truth beneath the snow. Great John spat on the marble floor, but Meege Mormont stepped forward, green cloak smelling of salt and bear's breath. My island lies nearer the winds from Hardhome than any Southron holdfast. We've lost ships, we've lost cousins. I will ride. The hall divided like an ironwood split by frost. Half clung to hearth and harvest, half heard wolves in the wind. Stannis ended debate with flint words. Volunteers may follow, conscripts may stay and patch walls, but I ride at month's end. Wildfire and lions are spent. Winter is not. 2 nights later, Tyrion found Sansa Stark in the tower of the Hand's library, the only chamber not commandeered by Tyrell scribes compiling tax rosters. She perched on a stool beside a brazier, tracing a finger down a book of lineages as if the names might rearrange to grant safety. Tyrion cleared his throat, quietly lest she startle. The palace echoes worse than the Eyrie these days, he said. Between rose banners and Baratheon stags, there's scarcely room for a lonely lion. Might I share your fire? She offered a ghost of a smile and gestured to the opposite stool. Tyrion eased onto it, aching leg grateful for respite. News from the dungeons, he said, hands steepled. Your sister Arya's not been found, though some swear she roams the city in beggar rags with a pack of wolf dogs. Tommen will foster at Dragonstone. And Joff, well, the Black Cells temper arrogance poorly.
Sean sovaicht ember spirks drift.
I dreamed last night, she whispered. Lady ran through snow beside Grey Wind. Then I woke and heard wolves howling outside the window. Do you think dreams can change the world? I dream of growing 5 feet taller and regrowing my nose, Tyrion said lightly. Yet here I remain, stunted and scarred. His smile wilted under her earnest gaze. But yes, some dreams sharpen us like whetstones. Others stab. Perhaps yours will yet draw blood from those who wronged you. Her eyes flicked to his mismatched armor leaning against a shelf. You could leave, she murmured. No one keeps you here now. Ride with my brother. The Wall might welcome a mind like yours. Tyrion snorted. The Wall welcomes debts and disowned sons, not Lannisters with half the realm's coin to their name. Still, he stared into the brazier until forged memories glimmered. Perhaps I need colder air, something honest. Hard footsteps sounded. Davos entered carrying a parchment tied with bronze ribbon. My Lady Sansa, the smuggler said, bowing awkwardly. Lord Stark invites you to break fast with him on the morrow. He asks you bring needlework. Apparently he needs banners mended faster than his tent wives can stitch. Sansa's cheeks colored at the old joke Ned Stark used to tell, that northern girls mend coats as quick as men mend quarrels. She accepted the parchment, and when Davos left she turned to Tyrion. I would not have survived Joffrey without you, she said. I shan't forget. Then remember my cowardice as well, Tyrion replied, voice suddenly brittle. Remember I knelt to your tormentors until self-preservation spurred my braver half. Do not crown me hero. She tucked hair behind her ear.
Heroes die.
I prefer survivors. Telegrams from the Westerlands arrived like frost-rimmed daggers. Lord Gon Westerling capitulated first, raising white banners over Crag. Ser Adam Marbrand marched to Lannisport but, hearing of the capital's fall and Tyrell alliance, found doors closed. His men disbanded rather than face starvation. Yet Tywin himself had crossed the Mander 3 days before the siege ended, a colossus of crimson reaving his own allies' manors for grain. Now his host wintered in Golden Grove, hauberks patched with stolen threads, but morale high. Rumors spread that Bravos would lend coin for sellswords, that Euron Greyjoy sailed to strike Dragonstone, that Dorne stirred. Ravens perched on every rumor until their wings drooped. Tywin answered each with measured ruthlessness. He executed any knight who deserted, quartered small folk who hid grain, offered bounties for Stark heads. Even dire wolf pelts fetched a fortune. When a sellsword company from Tyrosh balked at marching into snows, Tywin burned their contract, hanged the captains, and enlisted the rest by threat of flaying. Word reached King's Landing through merchants smuggling saffron past embargo. Stannis sat expressionless while Davos read the atrocities. Robb's fists clenched white. "He means to provoke," Robb said. "Dragons once found wolves tasty. He hopes we'll abandon the wall to chase him." "Let the lion roar," Melisandre murmured from a shadowed archway. "A louder roar rises from the snowfields beyond your maps. Ignore it, and even lion bones will feed hungry cold." Robb's resolve hardened. "We march north." Departure unfurled like theater. Tyrell spearwives distributed crimson pomegranates to slum children. Baratheon trumpets called each dawn as columns formed, a cadence older than Aegon's Landing, dating to the Storm Kings who raised the first drum towers. Thousands lined the streets to watch Northmen in bearskin cloaks pass Tyrell knights, whose armor dazzled even the drab winter sun. Some jeered, some cheered, but most simply stared, unsure who now ruled their tomorrow. Atop the walls, Tyrion leaned on a crutch, Podrick at his side. "I half think to join them," he mused. "Pod, do you fancy a mule ride to the ends of the realm?" Podrick blushed. "Lord, I fancy not dying of frostbite." Tyrion laughed, but the mirth tasted tinny. As the direwolves loped through the King's Gate one by one, Grey Wind, Summer, Nymeria, Shaggy Dog, Lady, an ache cracked his ribs. Not wistfulness, more like the memory of a truth too long denied. That the world outside scheming rooms still howled with wonders men like him seldom dared greet. He would follow, but first debts. Cersei still raged in a cell. Jaime awaited trial. The wildfire storerooms needed sealing. Tyrion had tasks, and tasks were a dwarf's ladder. Yet he turned to watch the last banners slip beyond sight, and for a heartbeat he felt a sudden, sharp certainty that he would see that gray direwolf again beneath colder stars. They rode 10 days before snow thickened from powder to weight. Then wheels sank. Then pikes doubled as walking sticks. Then one morning the world woke white and silent, as if color itself had fled. The King's Road vanished under drifts, leaving only the serpent-back humps of half-buried milestones to guide them. Scouts hacked spruce limbs to mark the path. Ravens circled overhead, black scribbles on a blank page. At Castle Derry, they found charred beams still reeking, courtesy of Gregor Clegane months prior. Robb insisted the small folk long fled return under protection. Tyrell quartermasters left sacks of oats and barrels of salt pork, a gesture that earned as many mutters from hungry soldiers as blessings from peasants. Near Moat Cailin, snow deepened to a man's waist. Progress slowed to a crawl. Yet this land was northern, and Robb's men moved with familiarity. They met no hostility until the neck, where arrow shafts like skeletal fingers protruded from tree trunks, the work of Crannogman testing whether the invaders remembered Stark blood. When Robb rode forward alone, cloak lowered so they could study his face, a single reed whistle sounded. Crannog lords emerged, their spears tipped with tar. "How fares Lord Howland Reed?" Robb called. A slim girl with mud-painted cheeks lowered her hood. "My father's bones ache, but he sent me to see if the boy he once Neil swore to became the man worthy of it." Robb smiled. "Tell Lord Reed the boy he met at Winterfell is dead. War killed him, winter forged another. Try the steel." He drew vigilance, its Valyrian ripples catching pale winter sun. The girl touched the blade with her spear haft and nodded. That night, Reed's men guided the army along dikes only visible by starlight. Without them half would have drowned in bog holes disguised by snow. Grey Wind trotted at Robb's heels, hackles high when ghost lights flickered across the fens. Some swore they saw knights in silvered scale beneath the water, dragging at hoof and boot. Crannogmen merely spit and hummed lullabies to keep the dead dreaming. Winterfell rose from miles of whiteness like a dark ship stuck in ice. New walls gleamed where torches shone off fresh stone. Old battlements remained ragged scars. Snowmelt steamed over hot springs, wreathing the castle in shifting mist so that banners seemed to float. Atop the gatehouse flew a direwolf stitched in silver thread, Sansa's first finished banner, and beside it the crowned stag. Catelyn had voiced doubt of the juxtaposition, But Stannis insisted kingship required no secrecy. Inside the courtyard, Robb dismounted to roaring cheers. Winterfell's garrison knelt, and servants wept openly to see their lord returned. He clasped their shoulders, called each by name where memory served. Bran greeted him on a wicker sled pulled by Hodder. Rickon bounded into view with Shaggy Dog, the two nearly indistinguishable beneath coats of wild black hair. Robb swept Rickon up, ignoring the wriggling protest, and pressed his brow to Bran's. "I promised we'd come home," he whispered, yet even home offered scant rest. Maester Aemon, brought from Eastwatch by an escort of Night's Watch brothers after ravens described Robb's purpose, awaited in the solar. His blind eyes turned as though he felt Robb enter. "I have measured long winters," he rasped, "but none like the one I smell on the wind. You ride to war that cannot be won with swords alone." Robb knelt before the ancient Targaryen. "Then teach me what weapons remain." "Young men ask for answers," Aemon murmured. "Old men offer warnings. Heed mine. Fire is friend and enemy, light two bright blinds. And sometimes the darkest road leads into dawn while the bright road circles back to night." Robb absorbed the words like a smith at forge, uncertain which strike hardened which part. When he rose, he found Jon Snow waiting in the corridor, black cloak ragged, cheeks raw from wind. They embraced tight enough to bruise. "Command elected me Lord Commander," Jon said, voice hoarse. "But the wall bleeds. We hold maybe 500 fit men. Rangers vanish nightly. And the wildlings." Robb studied him. "Tell me all." Jon's tale unfurled like a rusted chain. Mance Raider amassing tribes, whites stalking by dusk, giants beating war drums of mammoth bone. "We need swords," Jon finished, "and dragonglass. And if Melisandre's tales ring true, fire itself." Robb's heart hammered. "Tomorrow we ride." He clasped Jon's forearm. "But tonight sit with Bran and Rickon. Let Winterfell remember its sons." The force that departed a fortnight later blended north, river, and stormlands steel. Yet numbers alone mattered less than the five shadows loping ahead. Dire wolves spooked Garrons and warhorses alike. Ravens tracked them hungrily as though drawn to portents. Along the King's Road's frozen spines, small folk emerged from hovels to press root vegetables and talismans into gauntlet hands, whispering prayers to both old gods and new. They reached the Shadow Tower at sundown on the last day of the year. Its granite silhouette loomed against a sky bruised purple. Watch sentries hailed them weakly, eyes ringed with sleepless fear. Within the yard, knights removed helms and stared as though meeting legend. Robb passed through them without ceremony, stamping snow off boots before entering the mess. The smell of thin broth could not mask an undertone of rot. Leather, wool, perhaps even flesh soaked too long in damp. Inside the Lord Commander's chambers, a council assembled. Jon Snow, graver since Winterfell. Bowen Marsh clutching ledgers. Aemon seated near a brazier. Stannis in rigid silence. Melisandre, firelight flickering ruby in her eyes. Davos, fists on hips, and Robb. On a table lay the map of the far north. Blank except for two notations, Hardhome and the Fist of the First Men, both circled in dry brown ink. Jon tapped the fist. "Our last patrol signaled from here before disappearing. If we find them, alive or not, we learn the enemy's direction." Stannis traced a gauntlet along the wall's black ink line. "We strike soon. Each day the foe grows." Robb looked at Melisandre. "Your visions show victory? Fire shows shapes," she answered, voice mild as snowfall. "Victory is a mortal word. The flames show ice melting before red tongues, but also wolves bound in chains of frost. What your choices make of that, only your gods know." Jon exhaled fog. "Then let choice be ours." He laid Ghost's white fur-lined cloak across the map. "We form 3 ranging parties. One circles east, one west. The main thrust, with wolves and kings, rides straight north for the Fist." Silence tested the plan. Davos nodded first. "A straight line cuts gut and gold alike." Stannis offered a curt nod. "So be it. We march at dawn." Dawn drifted gray, muffling the world. The king's banners shook hoarfrost into the wind as columns trudged through the gate. Beyond the wall stretched a plain of white so pure it hurt the eyes. Dire wolves raised their muzzles and howled, the sound swallowed by immensity. Hours later, among sentinel pines wearing skirts of icicles, Robb sensed gray wind stiffen. A low growl rippled through the pack. He signaled a halt, hand raised. Wind whipped stinging crystals across faces. Then shapes emerged, dark against white, shambling figures whose eyes glowed aquamarine. Rangers' tattered cloaks clung to their shoulders. Blackened swords dragged behind half-frozen hands. Shouts went up. Jon's voice cracked. Whites! Archers loosed flaming arrows. Bolts hissed into snow. The first white lurched, torso ablaze, yet still advanced. Summer leapt, fangs ripping charred sinew. Gray wind barreled through another, bones snapping like dry branches. Robb drove vigilance through a white's chest, black blood spurting. The creature flailed until Robb wrenched the blade free and brought it down upon the neck. Even severed, the corpse crawled until a ranger lit it with a torch. Battle churned in a blur of white, ash, and red. When the last white stilled, Robb counted 13 bodies, formerly brothers of the Watch, now piles of steaming ruin. Silence fell, broken only by panting wolves. Jon knelt beside one charred skull. "They wore my oath," he murmured. "The enemy swells with our own dead." He met Robb's eyes, haunted. "We may number 10,000. They will number every corpse from here to Dorne." Robb sheathed his sword with a clank that sounded final. "Then we stop them here." Night encamped harsh and uninvited. Fire sputtered, refusing to grow under damp wood. Melisandre stepped among them, red cloak whipping. She whispered and flames flared, tongues green-white. Shadows danced across men's faces like omen masks. She drew forth a lacquer box and produced daggers of obsidian dragonglass. "Old as doom," she said, handing blades to the rangers. "Stone that drinks the cold breath." When she offered one to Robb, a jolt sparkled along his palm the moment obsidian met flesh, like touching lightning's echo. Hours before dawn, horns sounded from the western ranging's path. 3 blasts. The cry of the others. Every soul snapped awake. Dogs howled, horses reared, men fumbled helms. Jon barked orders, forming a shield line before the commanders while archers knocked flaming arrows behind. Through the black-blue void beyond firelight came a hiss, like ice fracturing underfoot. Out of swirling snow walked tall figures with armor that shimmered faint blue. Their eyes burned steady sapphire, faces narrow as knives. Between long fingers they carried crystal swords that glimmered with inner frost. Robb's breath caught. Legends stood their breathing vapor. Stannis strode forward, sword unsheathed. Lightbringer glowed orange, its heat palpable even amid freezing wind. The foremost other tilted its head, unblinking. Then it raised its weapon and struck. Steel met crystal. A ring like shattering bells filled the night. Sparks flew, some red gold, some blue-white. Each spark sizzled in snow with steam. The duel wove back and forth, Stannis' arms trembling under the supernatural chill. Robb could not stand idle. Gray wind snarled and leapt. Robb charged behind, dragonglass dagger gleaming. A second other glided in, intercepting gray wind with barely a slice. Ice sword cut fur. Gray wind yelped, rolling away but alive. Robb slashed. The dagger connected, and with a shriek like a glacier calving, the other shattered into shards that melted into steam. Seeing that, men rallied. Obsidian flew like black comets, finding cracks between armor plates. Each strike burst foes into mist. Arrows tip. Head with dragonglass reaped a grim harvest. Yet for every fallen other, more whites pressed in. Shield walls buckled under mindless mass. Jon battled beside Robb, Ghost tearing legs from beneath whites. When Ghost saved Robb from a blade at his back, the brothers exchanged a nod too swift for words. Nearby, Summer dragged a corpse into firelight where flames consumed reanimated flesh. Across the fray, Lady herded children of the Watch to safety, snarling at any white that dared approach. Suddenly a horn blast boomed low and rolling from the north. The enemy ranks paused, as if receiving unheard commands. Snow gusts thickened, whirling into a wall. Through it came silhouettes, massive and horned giants wielding tree trunks like clubs. But they did not charge the living line. Instead, they smashed whites indiscriminately, clearing a path. At their head rode Mance Raider, cloak of crow feathers snapping. Mance raised a spear in salute. "Crow turned king," he called to Jon. "And wolf turned lion tamer. What odd gods we've tonight." Jon's mouth opened, but before he spoke, the storm dove between them, swallowing whites, giants, and men alike in a vortex of white. Morning revealed carnage frozen mid-gesture. White limbs charred, giant clubs splintered, crystal shards glittering among drifts. Many lived, more died. Ghost lay beside Jon, flank gashed yet breathing. Gray Wind limped but stood guard as Robb surveyed losses. Stannis found him. Lightbringer's glow had dimmed to copper dull. "We broke their vanguard," Stannis said. "Yet they retreat only to swell anew." Robb wiped frost from beard. "And Mance? Ally or ambush?" "He saved us," Jon rasped, voice shredded. "Whatever pact he follows, it opposes the darkness for now." Melisandre approached. "King beyond the wall moves by the Lord's design or his own ambition. Either path converges on the same flame." Robb ignored riddles. He ordered barricades and pyres, salvage of dragonglass, carving of more blades from obsidian caches. Stannis' ships ferried long ago from Dragonstone. Ravens flew south bearing plea for axes and pitch, for Tyrell grain shipments to Eastwatch, for every blacksmith not bent over plowshares to hammer arrowheads of dark glass. The war had ceased to be a northern fight. It had become the realm's crucible. And though lions yet prowled beyond the heart of winter, Robb Stark felt the world narrowing to one question. Could men who had butchered each other under summer suns now hold the line together beneath winter's moon? He believed they must. That night, as fires crackled against numbing air, Robb sat under a pine whose branches shook off spindrift whenever sparks popped. Gray Wind flopped beside him, muzzle on paws, amber eyes reflecting flame. Jon joined him with 2 cups of mulled wine. They drank in silence, listening to far-off drums of giants and wolves' distant conversation. "Father used to say the lone wolf dies, but the pack survives," Robb said at length. Jon glanced at Ghost sleeping against the pine. "Then let's hope our pack is large enough." "If not," Robb answered, "we make it larger." In the hush that followed, a faint chorus rose, voices of men about the fires, singing a song more ancient than all their houses. It told of the Night's Watch forging light from grief, of wolves guiding lost children home, of flames burning back darkness one heartbeat at a time. Robb closed his eyes, letting the song carry his fears until they settled on the snow like feathers. Tomorrow they would march again, into forests older than legend, toward a fist of stone and a tide of unquiet dead. But tonight, somewhere between ember and ice, dire wolves slept at men's feet and kings rested their blades on shared earth. Frost rimmed every helm and greave, yet in each breath hung a spark of hope warm enough to keep the long night waiting. Cold haloed the camp in a silence so complete that men woke choking on their own heartbeats, as if sound itself had frozen along with the breath in their lungs. On either side of the embankment, pines bowed under iced mantles, their branches groaning like tired oars in a windless sea. Dawn remained a rumor. The only light flowed from the guttering watchfires, oval pools of orange barely able to lick the snow they melted. Dire wolves paced those dim margins, gray, white, tawny, shining black, eyes lambent, paws so broad and silent they might have been born of snowfall rather than flesh. Robb Stark rose from a bedroll stiff as armor, joints aching with the deep ache that speaks of cold, gnawing marrow, not merely skin. He flexed his hands beside a brazier, watched the fire's glow catch on the wolf's head pommel of vigilance, and tried not to think of the distance still to the fist. They had marched 5 days past the Shadow Tower. 5 days of whites in 1s and 3s, of snow devils that seemed to scream with human voices, of stars so bright they looked knives poised above their throats. 3 more marches remained if the drifts did not deepen. Two, if the gods, or whatever lay north of gods, proved merciful. His mother's letter rode in an inner pouch, the parchment's curve now molded to the hollow over his heart. She had written by flickering rushlight in Winterfell solar, telling him that Bran dreamed each night of a weirwood face crying tears that turned to icicles mid-cheek. Rickon refused his porridge, claiming Shaggy Dog had smelled winter wolves larger than castles. Catelyn ended with a line meant to comfort yet hollowed him instead. The harvest stores will hold until spring if spring remembers the north. Jon Snow joined him near the brazier, Ghost stalking at his heel like moonlight made muscle. Snow had slept in black leathers caked gray by frost, and his beard bristled with needles of ice. They shared a nod that contained all greetings men needed here. Jon lifted a kettle from the fire, poured steaming water into two thin horn cups already stiff with yesterday's layer of grease. The broth tasted of garlicked oats and old bone, but its warmth poured life back into Robb's gums, and he swallowed gratefully. "We lost another century," Jon muttered, gaze never leaving the darkness that ringed the dying watchfires.
Será werd finch.
Never cried an alarm. Just gone. Tracks? None. Wind scoured everything clean in an hour. Jon rubbed the bridge of his nose. They steal men the way foxes steal hens. Quiet, quick, and always the weakest of the roost. We doubled pickets, but I doubt it matters. Robb stared toward the tree line. Between trunks, shadows shifted with more intent than mere wind. Every heartbeat he half expected the blue eyes. Then we shorten the march. Hard ride tomorrow. Arrive bleeding at the fist if we must. And if the fist is lost? Robb blew steam. Then we learn how quickly a king and a wolf can build another fortress. Jon's chuckle had no mirth. We might discover how quickly the dead can raise one. He drained the cup, wiped his lips with gloved knuckles, and nodded toward the command tent. Stannis wants counsel. Inside, the tent smelled of damp hide and burning pine pitch. The map table had been nailed directly to sled runners so it could be dragged behind the baggage line, and flakes of snow still clung to its corners. Davos stood hunched over it, measuring distances with his only remaining finger joints. Bowen Marsh dabbed ink across small wooden blocks to mark ranger patrols, while Maester Aemon sat near a brazier, blind eyes filmed with tears from the smoke yet uncomplaining. Stannis Baratheon loomed at the head, gaunt cheeks flushed red with cold and fervor both. Beside him Melisandre remained in the only cloth not reduced to grays and blacks, the flame-red silk that clung to her like moving blood. Her ruby pendant pulsed faintly. "The main host moves at dawn," Stannis said, iron voice cracking frost-thin air. "We reach the fist by the morrow's dusk or die on the path. The young wolf leads vanguard with Jon Snow's rangers. I ride center with the King's Guard and the Red Priests. Davos holds the baggage and rear." Davos frowned. "Your Grace, rear guards meant for reserves and cripples. A smuggler's no commander of gold cloaks and green boys. Yet a smuggler knows retreat roads," Stannis replied, "and how to keep food from rotting in half-frozen wagons. That rear is the lifeline." Melisandre turned eyes that glowed like banked coals toward Robb. "Fire must flank ice. The wolves go first. The stag burns path behind. The sea knight keeps the cinders alive." Jon bristled. "We've lost a dozen already to ambush. Putting Lord Stark at point makes him a torch." "No," Robb said, surprising himself with calm certainty. "A torch lights the way. The rest follow in its warmth." He clasped Jon's forearm. "We trust each other, brother. That keeps us warm." Snow began before noon, soft at first, then thick as feathers from a gutted pillow. Each flake seemed bigger than the last, clutching at cloaks, blinding eyes, whispering over helms like distant weeping. The world narrowed to what a horse could smell. Paths vanished. Pine trunks stood as white columns in a skyless temple. Sound dulled until even the stamp of hooves felt dream-soft. Robb led from horseback, gray wind trotting in broken drifts ahead. The direwolf's pelt hoarded snowflakes like unset gemstones. Now and again he disappeared entirely in a gust, reappearing 20 strides farther with muzzle lifted, testing secrets on the wind. Summer padded slightly to the right flank, Shaggy Dog to the left. Lady and Nymeria moved unseen but for fleeting paw prints that filled seconds after they passed. The van numbered fewer than 400. Stark outriders, Umbers whose laughter shook snow from branches, Mormont's spearwives, and Jon's 100 rangers thin as funeral birches. They kept no trumpets, no drums, noise brought shadows. Instead, torches fitted with shielded grates marked the line, pinpricks of red gliding through white gloom. Near midday Grey Wind halted so abruptly Robb's gelding nearly plowed into him. The wolf's ears flattened. A rumble vibrated deep in his chest. Summer joined with a scant growl. The men felt it before they saw air pressure dropping like a swallowed scream. Jon slid from saddle, ghosting beside him. A raised fist signaled halt. Bows rose, arrowheads flicking snow. Hearts drummed loud enough to hear. Out of the storm drifted silhouettes. Tall, antlered, man-shaped but wrong where flesh should shape warmth. They gleamed faintly blue though no light fed them. 3 others emerged, swords like frozen starlight drawn. Their approach made the air hiss. Flakes hissed to steam on the crystal blades though no heat radiated. A 4th slithered behind, lank hair fluttering, eyes twin nails of midnight. Robb nudged his gelding forward. Grey Wind snarled, circling. "Dragonglass," Robb called low. No steel but Blackfire's brew. Obsidian blades passed hand to hand. The lead other advanced, expression unreadable on a face that looked chiseled out of moon glaze. It lifted its sword as if inviting a dance. Robb kicked free of stirrups. Snow sucked at knee-high boots. His breath crystallized around his beard. Vigilance hummed in his palm. In a blink, the other crossed 10 paces. Its strike half-blurred. Steel met crystal. The shriek tore straight through bone. Robb's wrist numbed at once. He pivoted, letting the curve of Valyrian steel guide the blade down and aside. Grey Wind lunged from the flank, jaws closing on the other's sword arm. Ice cracked. The monster shrieked, a sound like ripping glass. Spun, throwing the direwolf free. Blue blood, or something like it, splattered, freezing mid-arc. Jon came from behind, dragonglass dagger punching into flank. The blade sank as if into snowdrift, and the other burst into 1,000 white splinters that whirled away on wind. The explosion knocked Jon backward. Ghost leapt, shielded him from shards that burned frostbite where they touched flesh. The remaining others glided like vengeance unleashed. One reached Robb. Its sword slashed a breath from his face. Vigilance swung in counter. Sparks of blue and red lit the veil of falling snow. Each time blades crossed, the Valyrian steel sang like wolves at moonrise. Grey Wind rejoined, tearing at calf, but the other flowed aside. Then Nymeria blurred through swirling white, dragging an obsidian-tipped spear, one of the Crannog girl's gifts. She thrust upward. The spear pierce sounded like thunder in a crystal cavern. Another blizzard of shards, and she was gone from sight, swallowed by snow swirl, but her kill echoed in men's hearts. The last other stood 10 paces behind the skirmish line, watching as if weighing. It raised its sword and drew the edge down its own forearm. Jagged blue sparks spilled, coalesced into a new white rising from drifts. The act felt like mockery. Jon hurled his second dagger. The obsidian spun end over end, struck true. The other exploded, shards rattling like hail against helms. Silence crashed so heavy men sagged beneath it. Then cheers erupted, hollow, ragged, yet alive. Grey Wind panted, breath steam. Blood that had sprayed on Robb's cheek rhymed instantly. He wiped it with a gauntlet thumb and watched the color frost. "Scouts," he ordered. "If 3 slipped close enough to taste us, more prowl downwind." Jon touched broken leather where a shard had slit his shoulder pauldron. "They test our edge." Robb patted his arm. "And learn it cuts both ways." They reached the western shoulder of the fist at dusk that same day. The hill rose black out of blizzard, its slopes a stairway of wind-scoured rock where snow dared not cling. Atop, ruined palisades stood like rotten teeth, what remained of the Watch's outpost. Ravens circled, silhouettes painting broken rings in dying sky. As the van crested, Sulfur stink pricked their nostrils. Fires had burned here, green and unnatural. Within the shattered ring they found evidence of desperate defense. Arrow shafts fused into slag where wildfire had blown heat enough to warp iron. Rings of dragonglass darts littering churned earth. Blackened bones halfway melted into rock. No living man. No fallen foe either, save for crystal dust swept into cracks. Tents were pitched against the lee of boulders while rangers felled dwarf pines for barricades. Stannis' center column arrived under shuttered lanterns. Davos's rear guard hours later, dragging supply sleds, half their mules dead on harness from cold. The host numbered fewer than 2,000 now. They crammed fires close for body heat, accepted bowls of thin broth, and prayed to old gods, new gods, or any listening ear. Robb paced the ring wall with Jon and Stannis, torches spitting. The king's face seemed carved of the same rock upon which they stood. "They fought here," Stannis said. "Fought, burned, and died, but not long past." His boot nudged charred mail, still warm inside. Jon knelt, pressing gloved fingers to a rivet that hissed faint steam. Wildfire erupted maybe 2 nights gone. Whose hand lit it? Your brother's, or the foe's? Robb's breath plumed. "Though I see no white scorch marks amid the ashes." "Wildfire vaporizes trace," Stannis grunted. "We rely on hunches while the enemy gathers." He swept gaze across treeline beyond foot of hill. Darkness layered upon darkness. "We hold until dawn. Then we search for the survivor who lit this grave." They parted to inspect their sectors. Robb found Maester Aemon resting in a makeshift shelter against a natural stone outcrop where hot springs bled steam higher than any campfire. The old man's milk-blind eyes stared into emptiness yet glowed with something like anticipation. "I feel them," Aemon whispered as Robb stooped. "The dragons of my youth were husks, yet their heat lingers in bones. The cold that comes to snuff it, this is different, but fire answers." Robb almost laughed. So starved for reassurance was he, but stopped at Aemon's next words. "Your wolves carry sparks. One day the sparks kindle blaze unstoppable. Guard them well." Shivering, Robb laid furs over the maester and retreated. That night's sleep came fitful visions of wolves aflame, running across ice, leaving rivers of steam, until gray wind's bark snapped him awake. He rolled from cot, fingers closing around sword even before eyes opened. The bark came again. Then a horn, one blast from East Rampart. Rangers scuttled. Jon's shout carried. 5 scouts returning. Robb sprinted from tent, helm underarm. Wind whipped so fiercely it stole breath. Shapes ascended the slope beyond torch radius. Men staggering, half-dragged. Gray wind bounded down to meet them, sniffed, howled. Someone cried for a healer. They reached the ring wall. Torches angled in. Only 3 of the 5 remained upright. 2 carried a third whose leg ended in frost-rimmed stump. Snow caked their brows to alabaster masks. Jon seized the least injured, shook him. "What did you see?" "Fire," the ranger gasped, breath raw. "A glow beyond the weeping river. Thought it wildfire first, but color wrong, gold-orange, alive like Forgeheart. We neared. A giant. No, bigger. Something inside the flame, wreathed. His gaze slid unfocused. It walked. Every step broke whites to dust. Our torches burned green beside it, though no oil. Melisandre appeared, red cloak snapping. "Show me." The ranger tried to stand. Knees buckled. Stannis signaled litter bearers. "We ride at dawn," the king pronounced. "If fire walks the north, I will meet it." Robb exchanged look with Jon. Night's weight pressed heavier than the wall. Yet beneath it sparkled a shard of wonder. A walking flame? Rumors of glass candles lit in Old Town of dragons reborn. Now this? He calmed gray wind with a stroke and whispered, "Perhaps spring remembers." Dawn crept across slate clouds like a bruise blooming yellow, sickly and dim. They left half their wounded at the Fist steamy shelter with Davos and 40 men, then descended the northern slope. The terrain dropped into a frozen marsh where silted water slept beneath thin ice. Hooves broke through. Men cursed, hauled animals out with ropes. Breath fogged so thick the column looked half submerged in low cloud. By midday, the weeping river snarled ahead, water black beneath glass-gray surface, mourning in its slow gargle. The scouts' footprints formed a ragged trail eastward along its bank. Beyond, the forest parted onto a wide clearing, where tree stumps jutted from crusted earth like grave markers. Snow here melted in circles, revealing churned mud steaming faintly. At center of clearing towered a pyre, 5 men high, constructed of logs charred at ends but unburnt in middle. Rime etched every surface. Atop sat a stone anvil taller than 2 men, veins of ruddy mineral gleaming where sun caught. A hammer lay beside it, stone crown, weirwood haft. The air vibrated the way forge bellows hum after a smith finishes. But no flame walked here now. The host fanned out, spears at the ready. Nymeria's growl rolled across the clearing. Robb approached the anvil, heart drumming. The hammer felt warm despite the cold. When he brushed the haft, warmth leaned into him like coals through leather. Jon stepped beside him. This isn't wildling craft. Old as giants, Robb breathed. Perhaps older. Melisandre circled the pyre, ruby pulsing. She pressed a palm to the anvil, hissed. Dragon's tears, she murmured. Fire sworn to stone. Her eyes fixed Robb. Strike. What? Strike your sword upon the anvil. Hear what sings. Stannis frowned but did not forbid. Robb hesitated only until gray wind barked once, sharp as though agreeing. He laid vigilance across the stone, raised the hammer. The weight surprised him, heavy yet balanced like. Promise. He swung. Steel met rock with a clang unlike any he'd known. A chord, rich, resonant, spreading through marrow and frost alike. Snow exploded outward in a ring 20 paces wide. Every torch flared taller. Wolves howled, some in camp miles behind. When the sound died, vigilance glowed faintly red along the rippled edge. Steam lifted where it touched air. Robb's pulse thundered. From the forest came a second sound. Low, rolling, not quite word, not quite growl. Trees shuddered. Birds erupted skyward. Shapes emerged. Giants, a dozen at least, great mammoth-hide-clad monsters with blue glyphs painted across chests. At their head walked a smaller figure, lean and ragged, face obscured by hood of crow feathers. Mance Raider. He lifted empty hands high. Lay steel down, he called, voice echoing. We come to talk, not bleed. Jon strode forward, ghost at heel. Speak, then. Mance eyed the anvil, then Robb's glowing sword. You woke it, he said. We spent half a moon trying. What is it? Robb demanded. Gift of the children, Mance said. Old magic bound in stone. They forged one such anvil for each of the oldest clans, so giants could hammer fallen stars into weapons of wakefire. We sought it to break the Night King's bond, but seems the wolf is truer heir. Stannis drew Lightbringer. If tales be true, such a forge could craft blades to shatter darkness, or crown new tyrants, Mance warned. Giants behind him rumbled. We offer alliance. You wield the hammer. We lend arms and knowledge of every hidden vale from here to frozen shore, but share the fire. Jon glanced to Robb. We need them, he murmured. Walls alone won't hold. Robb surveyed the gathering. Southron knights shivering beside Northmen, wildling spears glittering with frost, giants breathing fog like furnaces, wolves pacing, a red priestess smiling at some secret flame. The world had bent, old lines erased. He raised the hammer and struck the anvil once more. The cord soared. Then he planted the hammer's haft into earth, blade beside. We fight the night together, he said. Wolf, stag, crow, and giant, as pack. Mance nodded slow. Then let the forge burn. Work began at once. Wildlings felled dead pines. Tyrell engineers erected tripods over the anvil. Melisandre taught torches to burn without fuel. Flicks of her hands coaxed rust-orange flame from damp logs. Giants shattered boulders for ore. Maesters mixed dragonglass dust into iron chalk. Every strike of hammer on steel sang. forging more than swords, forging faint hope into tangible music. On the fourth night of work, as smiths quenched a new quenched blade glowing sunset red, a cry rose from perimeter. Horns, 3, then 4, desperate. Whites poured from the tree line, a howling river of rags and teeth. The forge camp became fortress.
Spias bristelt, Archers lust, Wolves Tore.
Giants swung logs like flails. The new blade left quench hissing steam and found its first white before fully cooled, cutting through with light and sound, ash scattering like spent prayers. Robb fought near the anvil, hammer in left, sword in right. Strike, swirl, parry. He moved as if the blade whispered each motion half-beat before need. Gray wind guarded his back, fangs dripping black blood that froze on muzzle. Nearby, Stannis dueled an other taller than him. Lightbringer's tongue met crystal, sprayed sparks. Jon and Mance fought side by side, two trajectories weaving lethal braid. Obsidian dagger and longclaw of pale steel. Hour after hour they held. Dawn's first blush found snowfields littered with melting corpses that steamed like offal on winter butchering day. Of the living, fewer than before, yet enough to stand. As sun peered pale over distant peaks, it gilded the hammered blade in Robb's fist. A sword now named Frosthowl by the men who saw it shatter ice with a singer's cry. Maester Aemon, carried to field wrapped in furs, lifted head at the sun's weak warmth. "I am old," he said, "but not too old to witness dawn," claimed. Robb knelt beside him, sword point in snow. "Dawn's but a start." "Yes," Aemon whispered, lips trembling, though whether from chill or awe none could tell. "Now we march to hold it." Robb looked around. Giants restoking forge fires, wildlings binding wounds beside knights, Stannis watching with expression made vulnerable by exhaustion, Jon leaning on Ghost's flank, Melisandre raising hands toward rising sun as if greeting an equal. He felt the weight of wolves at his side and hammer in his palm. The first blow of spring struck upon winter's anvil. The road ahead would be long. To Hardhome to rescue what living remained. To the shivering sea for rumored dragonglass cliffs. Perhaps even to Skagos' cursed mines. But for this heartbeat, steel still sang from the strike, and snowflakes falling upon the glowing blade hissed into nothing. Robb rose, lifted Frosthowl high. Across clearing, men and giants and wolves and even red-cloaked priests quieted to watch. He let breath swell chest burned raw by cold and battle both, then spoke in a voice that carried through pines and past ravens and up into the frail winter sky. "This sword was born of wolf and flame. So shall we all be reborn, north, south, free folk and sworn alike. Today we sound one howl, and the night will learn to fear it." The answering roar shook snow from branches. Wolves howled. Giants pounded chests. Men shouted until throats cracked. For a moment longer than dawn itself, the clearing blazed with life. And somewhere beyond far horizons, beneath aurora curtains the color of spilled wine, the Night King turned his gaze south and felt, for the first time in centuries, something like caution slide icy fingers along his withered spine. Robb Stark lowered the blade. "Forge burns," he said, "into the dark." And they marched, hammer ringing, wolves singing, into a day unlike any the world had known since the first long night. Wind knifed through the shattered clearing, hissing around the forge like some wounded beast denied its kill. Yet the anvil still glowed with a buried ember, and every few heartbeats the hammer resting beside it ticked, metal contracting in the cold, sighing as though eager for another strike. A hush lay heavy after the white onslaught. Frost-rimmed corpses crackled while they thawed in stray passages of forge heat. Men and giants, free folk and sworn knights alike, labored side by side to drag the bodies into piles for burning before the long night fell again. Robb Stark moved among them, cloak hanging in tatters, vigilance belted and newly named Frosthowl cradled across both palms. The blade was still warm, soothing, almost against fingers blued by chill, and the ripples of Valyrian steel seemed deeper now, as if the sword had swallowed flame and grown new veins of fire. Every step sent a muted ringing through the metal, and in its resonance he fancied he heard distant wolf calls. Gray wind matched his pace, limping slightly from a gouge across the haunch. Robb had bound it with boiled bandage, but the wolf scented blood each time the silk rubbed. At the foot of a smoked pine, he found Jon Snow binding a ranger's ruined arm. The man-at-arms had taken a shard of crystal through the elbow, a sliver so cold it seared like red iron. Jon's knuckles were raw from hours at the forge, yet he worked without tremor, lips pressed thin. Ghost lay beside, eyes the color of new snow, nose twitching whenever the ranger groaned. "Water," Jon murmured. A wildling girl, Bara, if Robb recalled, raised a water skin and tipped it against cracked lips. Steam leaked from the man's mouth like a soul escaping winter. Jon did not look up. Robb crouched. How many unfit to march? Jon tied the final knot. Not enough to spare a garrison at the fist. 30, give or take. If Davos and Maester Aemon stay behind, we can leave them with wounded and the new smithy. His eyes lifted, lids rhymed white. You mean to press on tonight? We must. Robb's gaze strayed east, where the weeping river lost itself under acres of ice. Winds shift. Another day and those bodies re-rise against us. Hardhome still cries across the snows. He lowered his voice. And Bran saw something in dream, an ice tide breaking cliffs farther north. I will not wait for it to reach us here. Jon's nod was slow, resigned, but a flare of conviction shone behind fatigue. The forge should travel. We'll lash the sledges, load half the charcoal. No sense leaving a miracle behind. Robb touched Frosthowl's spine. We'll take it. If the children of the forest placed one forge, perhaps they seeded others. The sooner we find the next, the sooner we're less alone. A shout from beyond the pyre drew their attention. Mance Rayder atop a half-burnt log, conference of clan chiefs gathered in a half-circle. The king beyond the wall raised a hide-wrapped bundle. Hear me. His voice spilled across the throng like gravel across drumskin. Morn will see us east for Hardhome. The Night King devours tribes stranded on that shore. We owe them rescue or good death. Giants boomed assent, war drums struck by fists. Tyrell crossbowmen exchanged uneasy glances. Even Stannis, standing stiff-backed with Lightbringer angled across one shoulder, seemed to acknowledge this plan by turning away rather than challenging it. The king's face was red from a shallow gash along the cheek, but his eyes burned clear. He caught Robb's gaze, gave a curt nod. So be it. Melisandre drifted forward. Her cloak glowed ember-bright near the forge, but oddly, each time snowflakes touched her shoulders they fizzed to vapor. She laid 2 fingers on Robb's gauntlet. The fire within your sword is newborn, hungering. Feed it ice-hewn hearts, and it will sing loud enough for dawn to hear. Robb withdrew, uneasy beneath that ruby stare. Let the blade hunger, not the men. We march in an hour. Tell who you keep watch over to eat, however thin the stew. The first mile slid under the runners of crude sledges, pine poles squealing where fresh iron shoes rubbed. Giants pulled most without complaint. Their footprints formed trenches that filled instantly with blowing powder. Behind marched 2 columns. Northmen and Southron men on the left, free folk and spearwives on the right, separated by the forge which rode its own sled at the center, swaddled in hides against the cold. Melisandre paced beside it, whispering to unseen things. Whenever the anvil's glow faded too much, she rested a palm and its veins brightened, a heart restarting. Above, green lights rippled across obsidian sky, ribbons of ghost flame bigger than rivers, twisting like sea serpents behind transparent clouds. Maester Aemon, bundled on a litter, murmured that the old chronicles called such lights shivering stars and warned of omens. Few listened now. They all knew what omen the sky carried. By midnight a half-moon rose, hazy behind ice mist. The weeping river narrowed into a gorge, its frozen surface riven with cracks that leaked sounds like distant flutes. Scouts probed ahead, wolves first, then rangers on snowshoes. Within an hour gray wind returned, muzzle dusted silver. The wolf's silent warning brought both columns to stillness. Robb passed hand signals. Lines bristled with spear and obsidian arrow. Nothing moved. Then a single figure stepped onto the ice 100 paces ahead, child small, garbed in rags. It tottered, arms dangling, head slumped sideways at unnatural angle, teeth bare behind torn lips, a white. Behind it, 6 more crawled from the gorge shadows, some missing legs, dragging themselves with finger stubs. They advanced slowly as if bait. Jon loosed one arrow. The obsidian tip punched through skull and stuck in ice beyond. The white stilled, but others kept coming. Robb unsheathed Frosthowl. With that unsheathing, those nearest felt a warm draft ripple outward, absurd against the night. He walked to stand between columns, wolves flanking. Every gaze pinned him. He raised the sword. Its edge glimmered orange. Snow at his boots hissed. "Hold," he called, voice calm. "Let us see whose will drives them." The whites paused mid-shuffle as though hearing, then collapsed like marionettes severed from string. Limbs lay still. The ice cracked. A fissure yawned beneath the corpses, spidering outward with violent speed. Rangers cursed, scrambling back. Something beneath the river surged, white bulk pressing against translucent sheet. A shape the size of an aurochs pressed a human face into the ice. No, not human. Bear. Its muzzle blanched corpse white, eyes blazing blue so bright the river glowed from below. Utter silence reigned but for the crackling ice. Then the white bear struck upward. The surface exploded. Shards flew like knife hail. One giant roared, a spike through forearm. The bear hauled itself out, triple the size of any living beast, skin sloughed to show rope-thick tendons rimed in frost. It opened jaws ringed with icicles and loosed a roar that froze men's bowels. Frosthowl answered. Robb charged, gray wind with him. Jon and Ghost veered flank. Giants reversed sledges to form barricade. The bear thundered, claws raking frozen ground in blue sparks. Robb met it near the river's edge. His sword clove an arc at shoulder height. Metal kissed decayed sinew and howled. Sound blasted outward, a cord ringing across the gorge. Where blade touched, flesh vaporized in a puff of steam, spraying shards of ice. The bear reeled but smashed Robb aside with opposite paw. Plate buckled, breath torn from lungs. Gray wind leapt clean onto the bear's back, jaws digging for spine. The beast rolled, crushing wolf against ice. Jon drove dragonglass dagger into a foreleg. The limb shattered at elbow, yet claws still flexed, paw crawling like disembodied spider. A ranger thrust torch against stump. Flesh melted, the reek of foul tallow sickening. The bear gnashed. Summer and Lady joined, harrying flanks. Giants hurled spears as tall as ash trees. One shaft pierced ribs and stuck, vibrating. Eamon's litter-bearers laid him gently, then fired arrows though arms shook. Robb rose, ribs aflame. He saw gray wind pinned, blood blooming on white fur. He saw the bear raise paw again to finish. Something cracked open inside him, a dam of fear and fury both. Frosthowl leapt to hand, but he did not recall lifting it. He sprinted, sliding across ice. At the last step he vaulted, blade two-handed overhead. The bear turned glowing eyes. The sword came down through skull to chest. The cord this time was thunder, roaring, rending, echo swirling the gorge walls. Light exploded from the cut, an orange fan tipped with violet. The bear convulsed. Frost skittered off hide in flurries. And then the mass imploded, sucked inward as if the night inhaled it, leaving only a crater rimed with crystals cascading like sand. Silence returned. A low whimper, gray wind. Robb slid, hauling the wolf aside. The injury oozed but shallow. He pressed cloth, whispered. Gray wind licked his wrist. Relief threatened to buckle his knees worse than Claw did. Melisandre approached last, ruby blazing. She surveyed scorchmark on ice where bear died. Twice forged, she said softly. Once on stone, once in blood. The sword awakens. Robb ignored her and bound Grey Wind's flank. Jon leaned, touched the sword's flat. It's warmer, he murmured, brow furrowed, like a hearthstone. Stannis strode through throng, lightbringer flickering. That beast was sentinel. The master knows we come. He already knew, Robb rasped, sheathing. But now he fears. The gorge gave way to foothills by dawn. and by then the forge sled creaked with new weight. Scales of the white bear, gathered at Melisandre's instruction, shining pale blue-green in burlap sacks. She claimed they would alloy well with dragonglass shavings. Smiths muttered but obeyed. Camp was struck on a ridge beneath granite spire shaped like a finger pointing to bleeding sunrise. Fires struggled. The air thinned here. Rangers dug windbreaks, pitching hide walls. Giants built semicircle of stacked timber to shield forge. Snow drifted horizontally, painting everything in tiger stripes of white. Robb sat with Bran's latest raven perched upon gauntlet. The bird's feet were banded green thread, Maester code for urgent. He unrolled scraps sealed with wax and read, "Brother, dreams show a door of living ice opening in the mountains, and blue shadows spilling like rivers. Mother says trust your own wolf heart. Rick watches from battlements and counts the stars going dark. Hurry, be." He swallowed. Each line felt carved into bone. He penned quick reply, promising they'd march faster, then sent bird skyward though the wind near snapped its wings. Mance Raider joined him. The wildling king had shed crowfeather cloak for mammoth fur jacket dyed with ash. His black-brown beard iced to stiff curls. "Bad tidings?" he asked. "My little brother's dreams," Robb said. "Enough to scare old gods. Dreams carried me this far." Mance gazed east, where smudge of sea haze lay flat upon horizon though water lay many leagues. Hardhome's campfires used to glitter on that sky. Now only smoke. He shifted. "You still trust Stannis when battle's done?" Robb considered. "He has honor, though it cuts sharper than most can stomach. But victory shapes men. If the night falls and we stand, I'll keep him ally by choice, if not by necessity." Mance laughed quietly. "Kings and their necessities." He ran thumb along knife hilt. "Wildlings follow me because I won freedom from walls. One wall remains, the one within men's skulls dividing ours and other. If we survive, tear that down too." Robb extended hand. "Let's live long enough to argue about it." Mance clasped forearm, nodding. Across the ridge Jon drilled archers. Southron boys and used to snowstrings, wildlings suspicious of Tyrell. He walked lines correcting stances, ghost shadowing. Beside an overturned sled Bran's reed-thin messenger, Mira, fletched new arrows with owl feathers, telling watchers that nocturnal vein helped arrows fly true in aurora winds. Stannis convened captains near midday. A crude map scratched onto stretched hide pinned to crate. Here the ridge, here a cut called Widow's Mouth, beyond Hardhome cliffs encircling bay like jaws. Scouts claimed white hordes ringed the settlement but parted at midshore where smoke rose. Living camp still holding out. Sea ice calved daily, sending bergs grinding. To reach them required descending ravines choked with dead. "Then we strike as hammer and anvil," Stannis decided. Giants open ravines west. Rangers slip cliffs east on ropes, flank. Main host charges center with forge sled. We carve path to survivors, torch the dead, and ferry living out. Murmurs. Davos, newly arrived from the rearguard, scratched salt-peppered beard. "Ferry on what, your grace?" The bays choked. "We build rafts," Jon suggested. "Or cut free an iceberg, push survivors aboard." Robb shook head. "Too slow. We hold ground at Hardhome itself, burn pyres high. If the Night King wants bodies, he must wade through flame and wolves." He tapped Frosthowl's hilt. "We buy time till Tyrell galleys break sea ice. I sent Raven to Wyman Manderley. His whalers know northern flows." Stannis accepted after moments' silent judgment. "We march sunset. Under nights cover the foe seas as well as day, but Lightbringer and your wolves will give them pause." Melisandre corrected. "Fear," her smile ember-thin. Sunset spilled copper and violet through torn cloud. Snow glittered like crushed sapphires. They broke camp in 3 wedges. Giants at 4 swung lanterns filled with whale oil to melt drifts. Wolves darted ahead, white shapes against gloom. Behind, men bore shields face. D with freshly riveted plates forged from bare shards. Ice could fracture on them without seeping. The anvil sled trailed middle, hammer-strapped. Its pulse felt through the reins. Descent into Widow's Mouth proved nightmare. The ravine walls funneled wind so fierce it shrieked lyrics of madness. Some men swore the gusts spoke their own names. Loose shale lurked under snow. Twice sledges tumbled, spilling coal that hissed into black nothing afar. Yet giants roped broken runners, hauled cargo again, singing in deep old tongue. Melisandre's torches marked the route, flames green and gold, seeming immune to wind. Half-night later they crested Final Lip overlooking Hardhome Valley. No map prepared them. The settlement, a sprawl of turf halls and log cabins, burned in waves. Pockets of orange flame where living fought siege, ribbons of sickly green wildfire snaking among shacks where some alchemist's cache had detonated. Between fires moved thousands of silhouettes, whites thronging, their eyes a field of foxfire beneath ash. At Valley Head a glacier loomed, cracked like glass under torchlight, and along its face marched the others. Slim, tall, carrying spears of frozen starlight, thralls drifting behind like banners of death. Central square of Hardhome still held living. Ring of sharpened logs, maybe 200 men, women, children, surrounded by toppled sleds. Within ring, a single heart tree trunk jutted from snow, an incongruous white bark totem, its red leaves long dead. Around it, flames guttered from pitch-soaked trenches dug hurriedly. A horn sounded thrice, watchers on palisade glimpsing the arriving host. But the Night King's army felt vibrations first. Whites pivoted as one. The others along glacier turned faces of sculpted moon ice to ridge.
Robb scoot tightened.
Signal. Jon raised black arrow fletched crimson. He loosed high. At apex the shaft burst in spray of sparks, red as fresh blood. Wolves threw back heads. Their howls cascaded down ravine, rolling thunder that rattled icicles off roofs below. Giants roared answer, beating drum chests. Charge. Giants lumbered downhill, logs repurposed as battering rams. Archers followed, letting fly obsidian-tipped shafts that trailed streaks of orange fire, each arrowhead bathed in forge oil. Where they struck whites exploded into frost smoke, leaving limbs still twitching. Southron knights advanced in wedge, shields interlocked, halberds sweeping. Free folk slingers hurled clay pots of lamp oil that burst in sheets of flame. The valley shook as first lines met. Timber rams smashed through a rank of corpses, bones shattering like tinder. Giants stomped, each step pulping 3 dead. Wolves darted under legs, hamstringing. Frosthowl cleaved a path for Robb as if blade had mined, arcs of molten orange carving white shapes. Each kill fed the sword, glow brightening. Near the center, an other stepped to oppose, armor scaled with snowflake motifs, long hair like threads of glass. A thrust spear. Robb parried, Valyrian steel screeching on crystal. Cold bit through gauntlet, forearm numb instantly. He answered with hammer blow from left. The hammer's stone head rang anvil, connecting with hip. The other staggered. Frosthowl flashed and took arm at elbow. Blue shards flowered, body folding like broken marionette. But more came. Everywhere whites crawled up flanks, piling onto giants, biting, clawing. One giant fell screaming as ice blade pierced eye. Baratheon spearmen rushed to cover. At rear, the anvil juggernaut trundled, rope pulled by mules until they panicked. Davos cut them free, urged men to manpower haul. Melisandre walked beside, chanting, each phrase a beat that made sled jolt forward as though urged by unseen oxen. Stannis, in thick breastplate rhymed white, battled near Robb now. Lightbringer left smoking channels through flesh. He shouted orders, flank left, burn bodies, no piles. Fire pits swallowed corpses, but fuel dwindled. They reached Hardhome's palisade. Survivors within sobbed at sight, children staring wide at direwolves leaping fire trench, mothers shrieking names. A crude gate withstood whites on one side. Giants breached opposite, but carefully to spare living. Wildlings poured in first, throwing sealskin cloaks over huddled folk. Ironborn refugees there, deserters from Euron, coward yet grasped offered axes. Robb surged through gap with 10 nightwolves. "Fall back to forge," he ordered square defenders. They herded civilians outward, across gore-sleek snow, into corridor held by shield wall of Mormont women. For a breath it seemed possible. Then the glacier cracked, a sound like mountains splitting drowned battle. All eyes turned. A fissure zipped across ice face. Slabs the size of castles calved, crashing in avalanches that consumed ranks of whites and living alike. From whirlwind of powder strode the Night King, tall, skin corpse-pale, crowned with frost horns. Armor of ribs cast in blue crystal, cloak of swirling darkness itself. Eyes twin stars of cold so deep they burned. He raised one hand. The dead around jolted upright, those felled moments ago wrenched by unseen strings. Even giant corpses lumbered anew. Fear slashed through host sharper than any sword. Some men froze, others broke ranks. Robb felt Frosthowl vibrate like plucked bowstring, quaking. Melisandre stepped forward on small rise, arms extended, ruby blazing. Stannis advanced, lightbringer of flame. Robb joined, hammer in offhand. Night King descended slope, each step hoarfrosting air. 20 others behind, spears gleaming. Between armies stretched churned field of corpses slowly reanimating. Jon sprinted to Robb's side, longclaw raised. "Hold line," Robb whispered. "If we break, Winterfell falls." The Night King halted 20 paces away. Wine died as if universe held breath. He regarded swords, fire, men, wolves with expressionless calm. Then he opened gloved hand. Snow swirled into sphere above palm. Swelled, condensed, shaping jagged shard. With flick he hurled. Thunderous crack and a spear of black ice shot toward forge sled behind. Melisandre chanted. A curtain of orange flame erupted. Spear vaporized mid-air. Steam screamed skyward. Stannis answered, cast throwing dagger wreathed in red gold. It pierced air but slowed, encased in frost, shattered before reaching foe. Robb couldn't wait. He roared charge. He, Jon, Stannis, Melisandre. Grey wind, ghost, for giants 20 knights rushed. Night King raised hand again. Frost storm blinding. Vision gone. Robb felt ice needles scour skin. Armor stiffened. But sword blazed hotter, light slicing mist. He pressed on, emerged mere yards from Night King. Others moved to intercept. A giant swung log, smashing two aside but took spear through throat. Crystal roots spread, giant collapsed petrified. Jon dueled one, dragonglass parry, riposte. Their blades sang frost and fire. Robb hammered aside spear aimed at his chest. Frosthowl cut through two whites in sweep. Then he stood before Night King. Blue eyes met gray. For instant, the world reduced to silent snow globe containing two kings and a howl trapped in steel. Night King's sword appeared in hand. A blade of shadow rhymed with blue fire. He lunged, faster than thought. Robb barely parried. Sparks of orange and azure detonated. Cold numbed shoulder. Night King pressed, strokes flowing serpentine, unnatural angles. Each clash drained warmth. Glimpses of memories froze. Catelyn's laugh, Bran's first ride, threatened to shatter like glass. Robb forced focus. He shifted weight, drew hammer back and feinted high, swung low. Night King glided, parry fluid. But Frosthowl remembered Bear's heart. It sang, waking. Next strike carved through opposing blade. Night King blocked but edge chipped, blue fragments raining. For the first time, the Ancient One hesitated. Melisandre's voice rose behind Robb, a hymn of R'hllor. Flames burst along trench lines, pillars marking battlefield like fiery monoliths. The light struck Night King's face, casting long shadows. Robb saw flicker, annoyance, fear, then cold fury. Night King thrust empty hand toward gray wind bounding for flank. A lance of ice erupted from ground, impaling Wolf's leg, pinning Wolf mid-leap. Gray wind yelped, stuck. Rage blinded Robb. He turned back too slow. The enemy's sword stabbed. Studded plate parted. A line of pain seared across ribs. Ice burned deeper than steel. He staggered, breath a ragged rasp. Night King raised weapon for finishing blow. but Lightbringer intercepted, sparks showering. Stannis snarled, driving forward. Night King parried, but Robb used moment. He wrenched hammer up, two-handed, and brought it down upon Frosthowl's spine, striking sword against hammer like smith forging anew. The impact sent a hum through metal, through ground, through souls. Blade flashed blinding white, then orange hot. He pivoted, swung horizontal. Night King attempted to dodge, blade angled, but Frosthowl severed tip of his sword, shearing inches from chest. Where Valyrian edge met frost flesh, a line of glowing cracks raced across Night King's torso, branching like lightning under skin. A scream ripped from impossibly ancient throat, neither man nor beast. The cracks flared, blue light leaking. He leapt back, snow foaming under boots, eyes blazing brighter, as if rage alone held him whole. He thrust both palms outward. Shockwave of cryogenic wind blasted field. Fire trenches extinguished. Men flung like dolls. Robb thrown 10 paces, slammed into snow. Frosthowl dimmed, but not extinguished. Robb tried stand. Limbs quaked, lungs pierced by cold. He crawled, reached pinned wolf. Gray wind licked his face despite whimpering. Robb's tears froze mid-cheek. Night King retreated toward Glacier, others closing protectively. The ancient foe's wounds knitted with swirling frost, cracks sealing. He lifted broken sword remnant, ice flowing to reforge tip, yet wound still glowed faint. Giants rallied, throwing boulders. Jon and Mance dragged Robb. Gray wind freed after men hacked ice spike. Night King's host withdrew up slope, an orderly tide reversing, whites forming rearguard wall. The living could not pursue. Exhaustion and wounds staggered every line. Within minutes, silence reclaimed valley again, except screams of injured and dull crackle of few surviving fires. The Night King vanished into Glacier's maw, but living held Hardhome. Robb sank beside Forge sled, Frosthowl across knees. His glow pulsed, slower now yet strong. He pressed bandage to ribs, ice wound blackening edges. Melisandre approached, touched wound. Pain seared as she pressed heated ruby. Flesh steamed but sealed. Jon crouched. We live. Barely. Robb forced breath. But we marked him. Snowflakes swirled. Slower, almost gentle. Above, green auroras rippled brighter, as if applauding defiance. Fires rekindled. Survivors of Hardhome began to sing, hoarse, shaky, but songs nonetheless. Children peeked at direwolves licking wounds. Stannis limped over. We fortify. Dawn brings second assault. If Tyrell ships arrive, we evacuate non-combatants. Until then, every soul fights. Robb nodded. Forge must keep blazing. Next sword for Jon. And another for Stannis, for Mance, for Meej. We make an army of dawn. Melisandre's smile flickered. When blade count matches stars, even the night will kneel. Her eyes reflected Frosthowl's ember. But Robb gazed beyond, toward Glacier Mouth, where cracks still glowed faint. He silently vowed. The next blow would finish what Forge and Hammer had begun. Above, the first pale fingers of true dawn crawled across horizon, washing sky pink, touched Frosthowl's edge and broke into rainbows. For a heartbeat, Winter looked afraid. Gray dawn eked across the valley like a tentative apology, paling the last crimson tongues of bonfire until all that remained was a field of ash-stippled snow and half-melted silhouettes that only yesterday had been men, women, giants, and things far older than human reckoning. Frosthowl rested across Robb's lap where he sat on a splintered sled runner overlooking the makeshift encampment. The sword's glow had subsided to a gentle ember pulse, no brighter than banked coals in a smithy's trough, yet it beat in time with his own heart, a reassuring throb that promised more life still thrummed within the iron bones of the living. Gray wind slept with his vast head pillowed on Robb's boots, rib cage rising and falling in slow, even waves. The direwolf's leg was bound in 5 layers of boiled wool soaked through with Maester Aemon's aromatic salve. Steam drifted from the cloth where the old man's poultice still fought the cold lodged deep in muscle. Each time Robb's fingers slipped into the fur, he felt warmth returning where it had no right to be, and he thanked every nameless god of wood and water he had never properly worshipped. Below, the shattered town of Hardhome resembled the gutted hull of some colossal ship driven aground and abandoned to rot. Icicle spires jutted from rafters like broken masts, and the stink of charred whale blubber pooled in alleys where wildling cooks rendered what little fat remained. Through ragged palisades trudged a serpent line of survivors, dazed women, hollow-eyed elders, orphans clutching sealskin blankets, guided toward the central hearth circle that giants had heaped with fresh-felled pine. The giants hummed a mournful cadence to pace their labors, deep voices trembling the earth. Each trunk dropped upon the fire sent plumes of benzene-blue flame spiraling up, staining the snow a lurid turquoise and carrying with it the rank of burned ichor where white corpses were being fed to the pyre. A gust rattled splinters across the sled runner. Robb rose, easing stiff ribs. The mended ice cut twinged, but Melisandre's ruby burn had sealed flesh cleanly. He descended the slope, boots crunching glassy crust, passing knots of black-cloaked watch brothers trading arrow shafts with spearwives, Tyrell bowmen stripping the fletch from broken shafts to salvage feathers, and a ring of Mormont women instructing refugees in the nodding of torches soaked with whale oil. No banners fluttered. Every cloth that could catch wind had been repurposed into sling, bandage, or tinder, but the scent of sap and salt mingled with a faint, impossible warmth. The forges. The anvil stood beneath a timber lean-to the giants had christened the fire hut. Its glow warmed the air. Snow within 10 paces reduced to glistening mud. 3 wildling girls hammered a length of iron dark as peat upon its face, sparks snapping. Each time the hammer landed, frost howl echoed in Robb's memory. A high-pitched, clarion note countering the deep gong of stone on steel. Davos supervised with sleeve-rolled, oil lamp eyes hawkish. Nearby, a Tyroshi bladesmith, one of Euron's deserters, quenched a crescent blade in a trough of slush sloshing with flecks of charcoal. The blade hissed violet and sent ribbons of steam twisting into dawn. 3 more hours and we'll have your lord brother's sword ready for temper, Davos called over shoulder. Dragonglass inlay along fuller. Mance swears it'll sing truer than Frosthowl. Robb laid a palm lightly to the anvil. Warmth seeped up through glove, a gentle reminder of their dwindling fuel. Give the next to Meege Mormont's line, he answered. Her spearwives stand where walls are weakest. Davos nodded. Then to the watch. They gave the most steel and lost the most men. Robb's gaze returned to slope above, the glacier. Overnight, no further cracks bled light, but the ice face hung over the valley like a half-drawn curtain, waiting to fall. How long before the Night King comes again? Davos's throat bobbed. No more than tonight if he's half as furious as he looks. We wounded him, but anger is meat to such creatures. A horn blast, one mournful call, wormed through the cold. All heads pivoted east where Bowen Marsh's rangers manned a ridge watchpost. Another call, then 2 shorter notes. Davos exhaled. Ships. Robb jogged uphill on a path of crushed bones gone powdery under boots. From the ridge he saw, beyond tide-fast ice floes, black dots bobbing on sullen gray water. 8, 9, no 12 slender masts. Lateen sails snapped, green and silver stripes quartering the wind. Tyrell longboats, and beneath them, 3 broader shadows. Manderley whalers riding low with ballast of salt pork and whale oil. Their keels crushed thin ice sheets to turquoise slush. Oars beat steady. Jon joined him, ghost at heel. The wind kelp-scented, carrying gull cries. Wyman kept his oath, Jon said, and Lady Olenna made him hurry. Bless her thorns, Robb murmured. We can evacuate children and weak. He scanned water, but not all before darkness. No, Jon agreed, rubbing scarred knuckles. We still need to hold the valley, and the Night King will strike before we finish. The 2 stood silent, the wind riffling hair and battered mantles. Below, survivors cheered at sight of sails. Relief fluttered like newborn wings only to fold under the weight of encroaching dread. A gust threw rime against their cheeks. Somewhere beyond the glacier, a horn different from any human throat sounded. A keening call that made molars ache and wolves bristle. Robb turned. At glacier crest, a lone figure materialized. Night King, high upon a shelf of ice, robe trailing aurora shards. He raised one arm as though measuring sunrise. A swirl of shadows assembled behind. Others marshaled in phalanx, spears glinting faint blue. "He's early," Jon muttered. "He knows the ships mean life." Robb's heart thudded. "If he destroys them, we fight on the water," Jon said, "or freeze beneath it." Below, horns from giants boomed answer, deep chords that rattled ravine walls. Direwolves howled again, echo swimming up ice face. Mance Raider sprinted across shambles of street, his shadow long behind. "He comes," the wildling called. "Every dead thing between here and the shivering sea marches with him." Robb slid down embankment, landing amid swirl of ash. He gripped Frosthowl. The sword flickered alive, color blooming along veins. "Positions," he barked. "Evacuation convoy to River Delta. Tyrell boats will berth by broken pier. 8 giants hold the gorge bridge. Watch brothers with obsidian guard children. Everyone else, circle camps with fresh tar trenches. We burn until salt water laps our ankles." Stannis strode from flame-rimmed smithy, Lightbringer already ablaze, reflecting red in his single-edged sneer. "The stag stands by the wolf," he said. "One banner." Mace Tyrell glanced between them, mustache rhymed. "And the rose stands by stag," he added, voice wavering but eyes flinty. "My galleys carry trebuchet stones packed in lamp oil. We can throw fire from water if we hold shore." Meege Mormont shoved past him, green-dyed bear cloak aflutter. "We hold more than shore," she growled. "We hold our children's tomorrow." She wheeled on her spearwives, rattling hafts against shields. "To trenches." All morning they toiled while glaciers groaned. Giants felled pines with blows of fists wrapped in iron chain, dragging trunks to form ramparts where charred cabins had collapsed. Free folk drove whalebone stakes, lashing sharpened narwhal tusks atop, pale bayonets gleaming. Watch masons cut blocks of permafrost, stacking igloo-like turrets to shelter bowmen. Everywhere tar boiled in cauldrons. Melisandre walked lines, murmuring syllables that made flame leap higher each time snow threatened to douse. She impressed sigils of ash on brows, a tongue of fire for courage, an eye for watchfulness. By midday, sails scraped pier timbers. Tyrell mariners jumped to shore, throwing lines to giants who moored hulls in minutes. Gangplanks dropped, and children scurry. D'Over clutching bundled bread crust and carved toys. Mothers followed, reluctance heavy as chain. Yet by the pier stood Lady Catelyn, mailed and furred, hair wind-torn, speaking soft words that calmed panic. When she spotted Robb above on rubble, she offered frail smile. He returned it with a salute of his sword. That he could spare her this last stand felt gift enough. Ships filled quick. Still, thousands remained ashbound. Night King watched impassive. Then, as sun tilted west into hazy bronze, gorge mouth darkened with motion. White host cresting ridge, avalanching down. A river of bleached faces and broken armor. Silence save for hiss of ice in joints. Among them lumbered undead mammoths, hide in strips, tusks black with rot. And trolls out of myth, 8 cubits tall, skullcaps fused with rhymed mail. At their center strode others, each carrying pikes of glass that bled frost. The ground shook. "Archers!" Jon roared. Bowstrings snapped. Obsidian-tipped shafts streaked, bursting through white ranks in flares of lilac flame. Dozens crumpled. Dozens more clambered over them. Giants hefted boulders, hurling. Each impact cratered snow into geysers of bone. Trebuchets aboard galleys loosed jars of burning oil that shattered midair. Arcs of fire rained across dead columns, igniting clumps. Night King advanced serene, frost-forming carpet at his feet. With a gesture, fragments of glacier levitated, spinning like knives, then shot forward. One struck a giant's hip. Ice shards exploded from within, freezing marrow to glass. The giant howled, toppled, crushing 2 Mormont women. A second shard cut down row of free folk archers, flash freezing flesh to fracturing porcelain. Robb ran, sword raised, rallying to breach where rampart dipped. Gray wind, limping yet defiant, darted ahead, splashing across slush that steamed from Frosthowl's warmth. Meej met him at trench, torch in one hand, axe in other. "Ignite now. Wait until first mammoth clears tusks," Robb replied. "Then light them all." Bowen Marsh's crossbowmen peppered undead trolls. Bolts stuck but slowed little. Stannis slammed Lightbringer into earth. Flame fissures spidered from point, igniting tar ditches prematurely, but walls of fire surged sky-high, driving back first waves. Air leapt 40 degrees. Snow sublimated. Steam blinded archers, but whites shrieked as heat peeled hide from bone. A troll crashed into trench, thrashing as flames crawled over skin, but still it dragged itself through, embers hissing in open chest cavity. Robb vaulted, Frosthowl carving downward. Blade parted skull to sternum, notes singing so shrill it rattled teeth. Troll convulsed, then slackened. Steam roared from corpse, driving blades glow into brighter bloom. Behind him, Jon smashed obsidian dagger into a white's neck, pivoted, and shouted for oil. Melisandre hurled copper amphora across trench. Upon impact it burst in a hemisphere of white-hot flame, sucking oxygen in, shoving whites out like ragdolls. She whirled, chanting to keep fire alive against wind swirling with blizzard. Night King raised both arms. Snow flowed upward in twin spouts, weaving into titanic spears of rime. He cast them. One struck Tyrell Galley's mast, splitting oak as if straw, pitching sailors into frigid water. The second thundered into central keep of Hardhome where maesters tended wounded. Roof collapsed, screams lifted then cut. Rage pulsed through Robb. He and Stannis exchanged glance. With a nod they advanced. Wolves flanked, giants followed. Frosthowl and Lightbringer carved corridor through dead. Each clash with others glittered fireworks. Valyrian against crystal, obsidian against frost. Steadily the gap closed. 20 paces to Night King, 15. But whites poured thick as poured gravel. Every step forward cost inches of blood. Suddenly Frosthowl warbled discordant. Robb looked. Cracks spidered from belly of blade. The constant song, hammer on steel, steel on ice, had strained edge. He blocked another spear, and 3 fragments pinged away, orange flecks dying to gray in snow. Panic pricked. Without blade they lost daylight. He shouted for Davos. The smuggler, arm blackened by burn, hauled sled carrying second sword, Jon's new weapon, not yet named, edges molten rose. Davos tossed it. Jon caught mid-sprint, felt its heat hiss. Night King noticed, his head tilted. He stepped forward, thrust Frost sword down. Tip touched ground, and instant glacier slick rippled outward, freezing tar, quenching flame lines. Darkness billowed, snuffing torches. Cinders died, and world plunged to blue gloom. Only Valyrian blades glowed now, 2 hearts beating. Robb gritted, raised cracked sword. Jon squared shoulders with newborn steel. Stannis lifted Lightbringer high, the soul torch left. Night King paced to within 10 paces, no whites shielded. He spread arms. Air crystallized between fingers, congealing into wide scythe of ice. One swipe would fell 3 men. Then came thunder, true thunder, from sea. Boom shook valley. Wind of salt blew inward. Everyone turned. The whalers' broad bows belched flame. Behind them, black sails taller than any Tyrell mast unfurled. Ironborn warships, the Good Sister fleet, but not Euron's. Banners bore Kraken entwined with Manderly Merman. Victarion Greyjoy at prow, wielding blackened crimson whip that crackled lightning stolen from some warlock stormjar. He lashed sea. Bolts leapt skyward, forked across clouds, struck glacier rim, sending tons of ice avalanching on white rear. Water rose, slurry of ice and slush, sweeping into dead ranks, washing whites off feet. Cheers erupted from living. Night King's gaze flared. He swept arm, wave froze mid-crash, a sudden wall of blue-white. But moment gained. Jon lunged, dragging new sword across frozen ground, cutting reflection of sunrise. Robb flanked right, cracked blade shrieking. Stannis drove center. Night King parried Jon first, spark sapphire. He pivoted to deflect Robb, heretic note chiming. But Stannis hammered Lightbringer downward, cleaving shoulder. For heartbeat frost armor held, then crack webbed across. Orange magma spilled where cursed ice parted. Night King screeched, sound of glaciers fracturing across millennia. Robb used that gap, slamming hammer pommel onto Frosthowl's spine again, blades glow erupting. He thrust into wound Stannis opened. Cracked steel bit deep, shards snapped along edge. Yet core drove through heart of winter. Blue light erupted outward, sphere racing. Every white froze mid-movement. Others halted. Glacier fissure widened. Night King stared at blade buried to hilt and chest. His eyes dimmed from sapphire to pale cornflower, to nothing. Then entire form fractured. Shards dissolving into snow dust drifted upward like moths to flame. Silence thundered. On battlefield, whites collapsed into inert piles. Others shattered glassily without master's will. Mammoths sagged. Trolls sloughed to heaps of brittle bone. Only fall of fresh snow remained. Robb staggered back, Frosthowl half-blade now. Jon caught him. Stannis backed 2 steps, mouth set in astonished line. Across valley, survivors stared, weapons lowered. Twins of green aurora slid away, revealing sky bruised but clear. First star twinkled though sun not yet set. Giants knelt. Wolves howled, sound triumphant yet mournful. Fire returned in trenches, rekindled by Melisandre's soft incantation. No longer needed to hold line, now to warm victory. Robb knelt to gray wind. The wolf nuzzled, tail thumped. He looked to Jon, light of dawn in brother's eye, and breathed. "It is done." "Not done," Stannis corrected, wiping blade on torn cloak. "Winter remains, but the night is wounded mortally." Mance Raider limped forward, spear a crutch. "We'll build songs of this," he said, voice raw. Wolf, stag, crow, kraken, and giant, all in one verse. Robb rose, wincing at torn stitches. He retrieved broken hilt. Half-blade still pulsed faint. "The sword gave its life," he mused. Melisandre approached, laying ruby over fragment.
No.
"It sleeps. Steel forged in fire and sacrifice never truly dies. Reforge, and its voice will return stronger." He nodded wearily. "Then we forge again. But first..." He turned to wounded, to wailing crews cheering, to mothers weeping. "First we mend hearts." That night, great fires ringed Hardhome harbor. Tyrell sailors roasted whale and cod. Giants drank barrels of sour wine. Wildling children chased direwolves that tolerated their tugging. Songs rose. Manderly sea shanties, stark hearth ballads, free folk ululations that mimicked owls. Even Stannis allowed a cup near flames, though he drank little. Robb found Catelyn upon bluff where Heart Tree Trunk overlooked bay. She traced its pale bark. "When all this began," she whispered, "I prayed to gods I scarcely believed. Tonight I believe anything may answer." Robb clasped her chilled fingers. The true gods were the hands that held each other. North and south, wild and tamed. He looked out where ironborn ships rode black water aflame with lanterns. "We'll need that after victory too. No more walls." She smiled through tears. "Your father would be proud." 3 days later, the Tyrell galleys sailed for Eastwatch laden with refugees. Giants pushed off hulls, waves slapping planks. Eddard Stark's bones, born from Winterfell in secret by Bran's insistence, were sealed in tar barrels strapped to Manderly whaler, to be buried on Green Island once snow melted. Victarion Greyjoy traded salted cod for permission to escort fleet, sought redemption for brother's sins or lusted plunder only he knew. Robb remained with host half whole but heart swelling. They would march south again. To Winterfell first, then beyond, carrying stories and broken sword. He planned to rebuild with same hands that saved Dawn. Watch brothers to police realm. Wildlings offered lands beyond gift. Tyrell grain feeding northern hamlets. Before leaving, he and Jon ventured deep into Glacier Fissure where Night King fell. At center they found hollow crater rimed with obsidian roses, petals thin as breath, edges humming faint. In floor lay sliver of ice, still pulsing. Jon touched. Frost-bit glove, but did not spread. Seed, he guessed. Robb tossed shard into satchel of dragonglass fragments. Best studied where maesters have warm hearths. They emerged to midday sun glinting off thawing snow. Ravens wheeled overhead hundreds, black against glaring white, crying praise or reproach. Robb inhaled steel-brisk air scented now with promise of spring. He expected to feel weight of crown, legacy, endless tasks. Instead only wind pressed, and even that seemed lighter. Gray wind limped to stand at his side, pelt silver gold under sun. Ghost padded to Jon's other flank, white radiant. Twins of dusk and dawn, Robb thought. Between them, maybe world will stay bright. He turned to Jon. We saved one dawn, he said quietly. Let's be sure we deserve the next. Jon's smile was small, tired, earnest. Together then, brother. One dawn at a time. They started down path cut through retreating snow, footsteps filling with meltwater almost as fast as they set them. Behind, the glacier's wounds glittered like glass turned to tears, but no shadow stirred within. Ahead, Hardhome's half-ruined roofs smoked as lumber teams salvaged beams to mend huts. Beyond that, forests dark with fur-promised game and sap for new houses, clay for kills, bark for dye, honey for children's bread. And farthest still, invisible but certain, winter's curtain lifted, thread by patient thread. They walked into that widening light, blades quiet, wolves padding, fires crackling behind, and the long night fading to an old story the world would tell and retell, each voice different, but the chorus forever the same. That when ice came for breath itself, a pack of direwolves, a crownless stag, a stubborn rose, a wandering kraken, and all manner of untamed hearts formed a ring of fire, and the cold relented.